Beneath the shimmering crowns and the elegant portraits of the British royal family lies an enigmatic tapestry of history, one that has often remained hidden in whispers and footnotes. As they wielded empires and shaped laws, the royals grappled with their identities, some painfully out of sync with their roles, while others silently defied them. This tale goes beyond mere scandal. It's an exploration of identity, myth, and the unspoken corners of history that yearn for acknowledgement. Today, we unveil the intriguing stories of 25 British royals who might not be quite who history claims them to be. You've heard the official narratives. Now prepare to encounter the unofficial retellings. Before we delve deeper, if uncovering hushed histories and overlooked accounts excites you, be sure to subscribe. Join us in exploring the shadows of the monarchy, and while you're with us, share where you're watching from and the time. Are you a late-night court gossip or enjoying this mystery over your morning tea? Let us begin with Edward II of England, a king crowned in 1307. Though he wore the crown, his heart and judgment seemed to belong to others, perhaps even to two confidants. In this tangled royal triangle, a legacy emerged so complex that even the most hardened historians struggle to label him. Was he a romantic or foolishly naive? It all traces back to Piers Gaveston, Edward's favoured companion, often referred to as his brother, but perhaps not in the conventional sense. Their bond, intense and emotionally charged, became the driving force behind Edward's early rule. Gaveston, with his charm and flamboyance, quickly alienated the barons, who were less than amused by his meteoric rise and lavish lifestyle. With Edward's affection came a palpable tension at court, with even Isabella of France, Edward's wife, reportedly relegated. Time and again, Edward welcomed Gaveston back from exile, oblivious to the kingdom's mounting political strife. But every tale has its dark conclusion. When it became too much for the powerful, Gaveston met a tragic end, executed, leaving Edward shattered in silence. Enter Hugh Despenser, the younger, a different type of influence. Where Gaveston represented reckless abandon, Despenser was more calculating. Edward's desperation for connection grew, morphing into an unhealthy dependency on Despenser, who sought power and lands, further fracturing the kingdom. Chroniclers of the age didn't hold back, labeling these affections as unnatural and questioning the king's masculinity. In a time when emotional alliances could shake thrones, Edward's deep-rooted need for camaraderie was both a lifeline and a noose. As tensions escalated, Isabella, fueled by betrayal and strategic ambition, devised a move. Aligning with her own lover, Roger Mortimer, she led an uprising against her husband and his favourite. The resolution was like a dramatic play unravelling. Edward was captured, Despenser met a grim fate, and Edward faced his own. The official accounts claim Edward was imprisoned and subsequently died under suspicious circumstances, perhaps murdered in a shadowy act. Yet, an alternative narrative lingers, the possibility that he escaped, living out his days unnoticed, a ghost of his former self, thus evading the narrative of history. The essence of Edward's life is a complex manuscript, a narrative clouded by the politics and performances of his time. Was he a queer figure in a straight-laced world? A king at the mercy of his affections? Or was he a soul adrift, navigating rules he never grasped, yearning for love in an unforgiving realm? If Edward II concealed his truth in plain sight, what of his great-great-grandson, who proclaimed himself a king of kings yet harboured his own hidden secrets? You might recognize him by his speech, as if he seeks a connection with shadows others cannot perceive. In the historical tapestry of monarchy, few figures loom as enigmatically as James VI of Scotland, later known as James I of England. This ruler instilled a peculiar discomfort in those around him, not through decapitations or endless wars, but by wielding a psyche more intricate than a maze, and a heart ever so protective, revealing its secrets to but one soul at a time. While Edward II's legacy was marred by the flames of passion consuming power, James' narrative unfolds around intimacy's sculpting of authority. His reign is immortalized through the King James Bible, early aspirations of uniting England and Scotland, and fervent proclamations of divine right that could rattle even the steadiest cleric. Yet shrouded beneath the theological discourse was a profoundly human thread, a series of attachments that blurred the boundaries between affection and influence. The tale begins with Esme Stuart, a French cousin who entered the Scottish realm when James was just 15. Wielding his title but yet to embody his sovereignty, James found himself captivated by Esme, a figure of charm and elegance, a stark contrast to the rugged Scottish nobility. Their days melted into a whirlwind of shared jewels and stolen glances, igniting whispers in court. The nobles soon panicked, preachers howled, and rumors accused Esme of witchcraft or daring to teach James an intimacy beyond the bounds of moral instruction. Consequently, Esme was exiled, while James poured his heart into letters that bared his soul. Upon Esme's untimely death, James mourned deeply, extending his grief beyond acceptable limits for a king. However, as the sands of time shifted, so too did James' affections. In came Robert Carr, whose meteoric rise as a favourite captured James's heart, though he possessed little more than an irresistible smile and charm. Lavished with titles and wealth, Carr quickly became the subject of speculation regarding James' affections. Following Carr was George Villiers, the pinnacle of royal favourites, who ingeniously learned from Carr's mistakes, bestowing calculated affection upon James. Their correspondence, filled with veiled tender sentiments, offers insight into James' private world, where warmth and intimate confessions coalesced. For centuries, historians have termed these relationships as intimate friendships, often sidelining the tenderness that fiercely illuminated his correspondence. James, a king overseeing two kingdoms, paradoxically found himself governed by a profound yearning for connection. Remarkably, his reign endured. He wasn't toppled by scandal as his predecessor was. Perhaps this resilience reflects a world evolving beyond archaic moral judgments, allowing a Renaissance monarch, who penned poetry, supported Shakespeare, and embraced divine right, to whisper affections into Villiers' ear. Yet, the enigma deepens. Beneath the surface of divine right and kingly resolve lay vulnerabilities born from early trauma, notably the execution of his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots. The scars of a solitary childhood forged his inmost connections with men like Esme and Villiers, not acts of rebellion, but gestures of mending a fragmented past. By the time of his death in 1625, Villiers had ascended to immense power, leaving the monarchy cloaked in duality, a legacy of both scripture and scandal. As James' Bible molded English faith for centuries, his letters unveiled royal intimacy often left in obscurity. Yet traces linger, hinting at a love that ruled as power did. And what of his precursor, Richard the Lionheart? Known for his boisterous valour, Richard has carved an image as the quintessential hero. Yet behind the battlefield is a narrative rich with complexity, a king who understood love as perilously as he understood war. Thus, as we delve into these royal chronicles, we pull back the curtain on intimacy laced with power, emotion, and the human desire for connection. If you've journeyed this far with us, consider subscribing for more revelations, and share where you are experiencing this tapestry of history from, whether in a tranquil midnight haven or amidst midday escapades. Together, we unravel the mysteries that history holds. In the tapestry of history, few figures stand out quite like King Philip II of France, a monarch shrouded in rivalry, diplomacy, and an intricate alliance with Richard the Lionheart during the Third Crusade. According to some chroniclers, their bond transcended mere political alliances. Contemporary accounts reveal a deeply woven relationship, where the two kings shared meals and even the same bed, an act often misconstrued through a modern lens. Within noble circles of the past, sharing a bed did not always imply romance. It symbolized trust and camaraderie. Yet when chroniclers make a point of noting such intimacy, especially in times of conflict, it morphs into a potent symbol, blurring the lines of friendship and rivalry. Even adversaries such as the critical Roger of Hoven couldn't overlook their unusual closeness. Historian William of Newburgh deemed their connection excessive, a term that in medieval texts rarely carried a kind sentiment. In 1191, as Richard forged a marriage with Baron Geraria of Navarre mid-Crusade, Philip's reaction was anything but diplomatic, hinting at a deeper emotional investment. This union was merely theatrical. With no offspring and minimal interaction with Richard, it felt more like a political maneuver. Richard's legacy was marked by the absence of legitimate heirs and scant romantic history, an echoing silence that grew louder upon his return from the Holy Land. After a harrowing ransom in Austria, he re-entered England, not as the mighty lion but as a king wearied and politically wounded, his fierce presence tinged with caution. In 1195, amidst ecclesiastical scrutiny, he engaged in public penance, a mysterious act that raised questions. What was this offense? The sources are silent, but the whispers suggest something profoundly personal rather than political. Scholars diverge on whether Richard's masculinity was so fiercely traditional that notions of queerness seem implausible, while others assert that bravery and affection can coexist, especially in an era where intimacy could indeed sway the tide of nations. It raises an enigmatic question. Did Richard harbor feelings for Philip that echo our modern definitions of love? The truth is obscured by the fog of history, but the consequences of their closeness were palpable. Their bond unsettled the status quo. As we turn towards Richard II, a boy king crowned at a tender age, the echoes of longing cloaked as loyalty resonate once more. He inherited not merely a throne but also an expectation of failure, a narrative meticulously crafted by contemporaries, a cautionary tale woven from softness and misjudged affection. In a realm still scarred from past tremors like the Black Death and revolts, kings were meant to exude strength, present unwavering masculinity. Richard, however, broke the mold. His poetic sensibility, preference for elegance, and affinity for beauty set him starkly apart. From lavish robes to funding the arts, he cultivated a court that reflected refinement. Enter Robert de Vere, Earl of Oxford, a man destined to be Richard's confidant and perhaps more. Their shared experiences of hunting to sleeping under the same roof ignited rumors of deeper affections. The fight for power erupted when Richard elevated de Vere despite noble discontent, an act condemned as corruption. Political backlash ensued, and de Vere was soon exiled, sparking Richard's resolve to retrieve his dignity in a whirlwind of tyranny, where power was reclaimed at a significant cost. Yet the portrayal of Richard as a king seduced by luxury secured its place in history. Accusations of effeminacy trailed behind him, an insistent whisper undermining his legacy. While the nature of Richard and de Vere's bond remains elusive, its repercussions were well known throughout the nobility. Etiquette and gender performance were at stake, as Richard's court luxuriated in theatricality, much to the chagrin of an era that prized martial valor. Peaceful strategies were seen as signs of weakness. Ultimately, it was Henry Bolingbroke, later known as Henry IV, who seized control, prompting Richard's downfall, after which theories about his demise proliferated: starvation, murder, or possibly a secret escape. Yet amidst these narratives lies the undeniable truth. Richard II did not merely lose power, but also the narrative of his own reign. Here was a boy king enamored with beauty in an unforgiving world, a ruler too gentle in a landscape that revered brutality. And as the tale unfolds, the next name on our list beckons, the narrative shadowed by affinities and distinctions. For in this realm, kings were often judged not just by their might, but by the company they kept. 5. William III of England stands as a figure shrouded in careful calculation. History may serve as a reflective surface, yet William was adept at glancing away, embodying an almost ethereal presence as he emerged from the Low Countries. With an air as chilling as mist, he ascended not through magnetic charisma but through deft manipulation. To most English citizens, he was a necessary disruption. A Protestant prince wed to Mary, the daughter of the Catholic James II, conveniently positioned to act when Parliament deemed the reigning king too extreme. Yet, rather than storming the throne, William entered England amidst a state of indifference. There were no welcoming celebrations, only a heavy acceptance of his presence. His approach was devoid of pomp, marked by a coronation that was almost perfunctory. His speeches were minimal. His smile, a rare sight, felt more concerning than comforting. Observers soon realized the distinct manner of his governance, marked by unwavering loyalties and intense preferences. He eschewed a broad circle of acquaintances, instead fostering a fortress-like inner sanctum led by a figure named Hans William Bentinck. This was no typical advisor. Bentinck had been a loyal companion from their youth in the Netherlands, evolving from a page to a confidant. When William fell ill, it was Bentinck who kept vigil by his side. During the English invasion, he orchestrated vital operations, and post-revolution, he ascended to the Earl of Portland, becoming the most influential figure without a crown. Their correspondence remains, filled with vagueness and carefully chosen words. In one letter, William confides to Bentinck that he possesses all his trust and affection. In another, he questions the apparent cooling of their bond, letters suggestive of something far deeper than mere political camaraderie. Whispers began to circulate, Parliament muttered, and within the court, speculation grew, especially from Queen Mary, who observed as her husband favoured Bentinck above even herself. Publicly, she donned the guise of the loyal queen, yet in private, she likely counted the costs to her authority. When Mary passed away without children in 1694, William continued his reign, carrying a cold formality, encapsulated in a tight circle of men he relied upon emotionally, a dynamic that struck outsiders as strikingly intense. Following Bentinck arose Arnold East van Kiel, a dashing young Dutch nobleman who swiftly climbed the ranks, captivating attention with his devotion. Courtiers began to express concerns about the implications of William's apparent favoritism, with one suggesting this might tarnish the king's reputation not for Kiel's actions, but for their overt nature. William generously bestowed land, titles, and closeness upon Kiel, which felt unrefined to observers, although no inappropriate evidence emerged. Historians continue to debate the nature of these relationships. Were they romantic or forged through shared experience in wartime and exile? Yet if we step back from the urge to categorize, a pattern emerges. William strategically surrounded himself not with sycophants, but with those who fostered a sense of safety, who embraced the silence of shared burdens, and who stood firm against accusations of being detached or foreign. Perhaps this was his overarching strategy. He neither sought to charm England nor to conquer. Rather, he endeavored to endure, navigating his reign like a captain steering a ship through a storm, controlled, tight-lipped, and emotionally restrained in public while deeply reliant on his chosen few in private. Notably, these confidants were all men. In the wake of his death, William, plagued by failing health and an atmosphere of icy formality at court, left no heirs or clearly defined truths, merely letters woven with intricacies and ambiguity, enough to keep historians pondering for years to come. Yet, as William ruled from a shadowy realm, the next monarch burst forth into the limelight, known for a court draped in silk, scandal, and a theatrical disregard for the era's moral compass. His reign barely lasted 13 years, earning him the moniker Rufus, as the question lingered. Was he the sovereign of England or merely auditioning for the role? In the annals of history, there lies a perplexing figure known as William II, or more infamously, Rufus, the Red King. His legacy remains shrouded in intrigue, defying the narratives that historians typically impose. Reigning from 1087 to 1100, he exists as a curious juxtaposition between the towering figure of his father, William the Conqueror, and the saintly reputation of his sibling, Henry I. Instead of celebrated, his reign is often shrouded in descriptors like troublesome, impious, or unpopular, labels born from the discomfort of a history that struggles to reconcile his existence. With no marriage and no heirs, Rufus stood apart in an era dominated by the need for royal lineage. His court was vibrant yet secular, embodying excess in attire and lifestyle. This flamboyance attracted the scrutiny of chroniclers like Orderic Vitalis and Eadmer, who were quick to label it effeminate, filled with men who dressed in ways that mimicked women. This went beyond mere fashion. It was seen as a moral failing that threatened the established ecclesiastical order. Archbishop Anselm, revered in later times, found himself at odds with Rufus, not merely over governance but over underlying issues of masculinity and authority. William's reign felt like a theatrical spectacle to the church and the monks, sparkling yet devoid of spiritual substance. Despite being a king, he demonstrated indifference to the expectations tied to his role, sparking whispers of moral deviance, with accusations of sodomy echoing in his absence of romantic attachments. Unlike his successors who left behind love letters steeped in secrecy, Rufus offered a barren legacy. No poems, no personal reflections, just a reign that ended abruptly. The tale concludes in the New Forest, where death struck him with an arrow in 1100. The official narrative simplifies it as an accident, while conspiracy theories abound. Some suggest a calculated move by his brother who swiftly seized the crown, while others propose divine retribution against a ruler who defied moral conventions. Yet, perhaps the more harrowing truth is how readily he was forgotten. Rufus was interred in Winchester Cathedral without honours, his burial void of grandeur, echoing the silence long associated with his reign. His narrative, unlike those of his contemporaries, warranted no flourishing legends or grief, fading into obscurity instead. But silence is not absence. It resonates with whispers of a king without a queen, a court devoid of tradition. Centuries later, another royal would emerge, this time from the poised facade of the 20th century. He, too, defied expectations, a figure adorned with medals, entangled in love affairs, and forever imprinted in myth. His name, George. Unlike Rufus, we possess the images that narrate his story. 7. Enter the life of Prince George, Duke of Kent. While many British royals glide through life like delicate porcelain, ornate, fragile, and subtly enigmatic, Prince George radiated like a stained glass masterpiece, vibrant and captivating whenever the light struck just right. Born in 1902, the fourth son of King George V and Queen Mary, he came into a world shadowed by his prominent older brothers, each destined for clearer futures. Yet, George was not cut from the same cloth of conventionality. Rather than casting himself for the role of king, he dazzled as a soulful performer, embodying a spirit far more intriguing than mere royalty. Historical accounts often struggle to encapsulate his essence. George was more than just a prince. He was a naval officer, a fashion icon with the allure of a movie star, and a figure whose narrative danced on the edges of scandal and whispered legend. While his brothers were busy making speeches and nurturing families, George gravitated towards a different kind of limelight, mingling with luminaries like Noel Coward and Cecil Beaton and indulging in relationships that didn't grace the pages of official history. His existence was a series of captivating contradictions. Military precision set against unguarded truths, polished appearances intertwined with unfolding scandal. He stands as the first Windsor ever connected to rumors of bisexuality, although the terminology of his time was wrapped in euphemisms and referenced through bohemian lifestyles and artistic circles. The elite of London buzzed with whispers of his magnetic presence, a figure always lurking yet never still. Journalists celebrated his fashion sense while artfully avoiding the intricate details of his personal life. Those who ventured into his world portrayed a man both charming and deeply melancholic, a brilliant soul on a self-destructive path. His public liaisons with women were meticulously documented, sometimes bordering on theatrics, yet his relationships with men remain shrouded in mystery. Modern biographers speculate on his connections with playwrights and diplomats, hinting at a fleeting affair with the infamous American spy Anthony Blunt, though proof remains elusive and hotly debated. Nevertheless, the strands of his story weave a recognizable pattern. George was not hiding. He simply chose silence over explanation. In an era where royals were tradition's embodiment, he represented discretion. And then comes the question of his demise. In 1942, during the chaos of World War II, George's military aircraft crashed in northern Scotland under enigmatic circumstances that have fostered numerous theories. Was he on a covert mission? Was the crash an act of sabotage? Did an unexpected passenger inhabit the cabin? The official narrative proclaims it a tragic accident. Unofficially, however, unsettling theories emerge, suggesting that George's complex private life could have cast a long shadow over his untimely death, if not directly, then in context. For George didn't leave this world as a plainly understood figure. He exited as a royal enigma, striking, glamorous, and perpetually elusive. His legacy therefore endures, a man who traversed the unseen, rejecting monolithic identity in favor of remaining an ambiguous symbol of everything that British royalty is traditionally not. Yet he was not an outlier. He was part of a recurring motif. Decades later, another royal would find his own way, subtly and openly, stepping into a similar role, a cousin of the current king, a father, a lord, who in 2018 would become a groom. 8. Lord Ivar Mountbatten. In the intricate weave of royal lineage, there's often a fixation on legacy that overshadows contemporary realities. Yet, Lord Ivar Mountbatten, the great-great-great-grandson of Queen Victoria and cousin to both Prince Philip and King Charles III, carved his niche in history not by adhering to age-old conventions but by subtly transforming them. His remarkable journey took a pivotal turn in 2018, when he made headlines as the first member of the extended British royal family to enter into a same-sex marriage. There was no scandal, no public outcry, just an intimate countryside event with close family, heralding the end of centuries of silence. It's all too easy to regard Ivar's journey as a mere quirk of modernity, a rare moment where a royal, however distant from the throne, dared to embrace his truth as a gay man. Yet framing it that way misses a deeper truth. Ivar's life doesn't clash with royal tradition. Rather, it illuminates a facet that has long lingered beneath the surface. The quiet existence of queer identities has always been part of the royal milieu, even if unacknowledged. Born in 1963, Lord Ivar grew up in the elegant, well-furnished halls of aristocracy. He attended Gordon, the prestigious boarding school that also shaped his cousin Charles, dutifully following a generational script: marry well, produce heirs, maintain appearances. Ivar complied, marrying Penelope Thompson in 1994, and together they welcomed 3 daughters into the world, their marriage lasting 17 years before dissolving amicably in 2011. However, it was in a simple, unassuming interview in 2016 that Ivar shared the words that would alter his narrative: "I am gay." No fanfare, no grandstanding, just a sincere acknowledgement of a truth that had eluded royal men for ages, despite the awareness of those around them. Ivar didn't announce his truth with bombast. He did so casually, almost nonchalantly, as if liberated from the need to perform. The public response was unexpectedly subdued. There were no royal reprimands, no tabloid storms, marking a significant shift in public perception. Instead of facing backlash, Ivo found acceptance. His daughters rallied behind him, and even his ex-wife joined him on his wedding day to James Coyle, a celebrated occasion hosted at their ancestral estate of Bridwell Park. This ceremony was modest, striking in its ordinariness, a radical departure from the grand displays typically associated with royalty. In a lineage devoted to crafting an impeccable public image, Ivo's wedding felt quietly revolutionary, simply a man marrying another man under the expansive Devon sky. Yet, the implications extended far beyond his personal life. Ivo's candidness was not merely an individual milestone. It signaled a generational shift, creating a fissure in the long-held conventions that had kept so much hidden. If a descendant of Queen Victoria could openly love another man and still be welcomed among royal circles, what truths about the past might this reveal? Nevertheless, Ivo never sought to transform himself into a figurehead for queer representation. His life and demeanour remained characteristically British, reserved, unembellished, yet quietly defiant. Instead of a dramatic departure from the confines of his past, Ivo gently opened the door, inviting others in for a cup of tea. Yet, within this modern tale of royalty, echoes of history reverberate. For every Ivo, there were countless others, men born long before who were shackled by obligation, cloaked in expectation, unable to reveal their reality. Some left behind clandestine letters, while others faded into mere whispers. Among them was a figure born nearly 500 years prior to Ivo, who stood by Mary, Queen of Scots, showcasing flamboyance amid a world that demanded conformity. His name was Henry, loved for his beauty and feared for his daring. 9. Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. The year was 1565 when Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, made his grand entrance into the Scottish court, not as a shadow but as a spectacle. Adorned in shimmering silks, with golden hair and an aristocratic lineage that intertwined English and Scottish heritage, he resembled a fictional prince sprung to life, albeit one whose tale was destined for turmoil. He exuded elegance and ambition, wielding a charisma that was both enchanting and perilous. Mary, Queen of Scots, was captivated almost immediately. Yet, the question remains, did he ever truly belong to her, or to anyone? That very year, Darnley wed Mary, a match celebrated solely by the couple, met with resentment from the English crown and disdain from Scottish nobles. Even Mary's closest advisers suspected that Darnley preferred self-importance over true partnership. Driven by a thirst for power and admiration, he quickly squandered goodwill, isolating allies and upsetting Mary, transforming himself from a potential king to a mere reflection, superficial and devoid of substance. Yet, the enigma of Lord Darnley extends beyond his evident political blunders. It lies in his emotional void. Although initially marked by fervent passion, his connection with Mary soured rapidly. His indifference during her pregnancy, coupled with erratic behavior and obsessive jealousy, rendered their relationship more dramatic than genuine. At the eye of this tempest stood David Rizzio, Mary's secretary, a talented Italian musician who fast ascended the ranks of the court, ultimately becoming her trusted advisor. Yet, it was Rizzio's intimacy with Darnley that sparked gossip. Observers noted Darnley's lingering presence around Rizzio, criticizing the soft affections he displayed. Together, Mary, Rizzio, and Darnley formed an unspoken triad, marked by grace, envy, and complex loyalties. The year 1566 witnessed a heinous act. Rizzio was brutally pulled from Mary's presence and viciously stabbed before her eyes, igniting a scandal that implicated Darnley, either as an active conspirator or as someone complicit, his motivations shrouded in jealousy, resentment toward Rizzio's influence, and perhaps something much deeper. After this tumultuous event, Darnley found himself increasingly marginalized both in power and in emotion. As his behavior became more unpredictable, he amassed enemies faster than friends. In 1567, less than 2 years post-nuptials, Darnley was discovered lifeless, caught in an explosion, yet found without visible injuries in a garden nearby. The contradictions surrounding his demise have sparked debate without resolution. Was this a murder, an act of revenge, or a mere accident? While theories swirl, the truth remains elusive. And so does the man, a royal riddle entangled in his own narrative, a consort who never embraced his position, a husband whose affections led only to ruin, a prince whose heart may have favored other men over ambition. His tale, layered with glittering facades and empty cores, reflects a life spent in the distorted reflections of mirrors and facades. Yet his story is not singular. Across the Channel, in another realm of ceremony and intrigue, another man's rise and fall unfolded. He was known as Ernest, whose downfall, unlike Darnley's, was marked not by an explosive end but by the gentle click of a locked door, sealing the fate that lay within. In the waning shadows of the Jacobite dream, where once glorious aspirations dimmed into obscurity, one last glimmer remained. Henry Benedict Stuart, the man destined for a crown that fate never delivered. Born in 1725, Henry was the younger brother of the famed Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charlie, a figure of legend. Rather than reveling in royal splendor, Henry found himself in the remnants of grandeur, while his brother engaged in fervent battles and reckless abandon. Choosing a path of service, Henry turned to the church, or so the records would have us believe. By all official reckoning, he led a life steeped in devotion. Raised amid the hills of Rome, exile transformed him from a would-be monarch into a cardinal, earning his appointment at the tender age of 22. Within the Catholic Church, he stood as a guardian, yet to the world, he embodied a rebuke to the Hanoverian lineage, a reminder of divided loyalties. His story is not just of religious elevation. It's underscored by the fact that he never surrendered his identity as a prince, privately claiming the title of Henry IX, King of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Acknowledging his noble status, Jacobites continued to honor him, even as their hopes faded into mythology. Henry's life was one of solitude, marked by celibacy and the absence of heirs, a state expected of a cardinal. Yet beneath this facade lay emotional depths entwined in close relationships with certain men, fellow clergy and devoted aides, relationships that sparked whispers rather than public outrage. Correspondences survive, revealing bonds of loyalty and affection, yet nothing unruly or scandalous, merely bonds that might raise eyebrows in contemporary eyes. As history frequently erases the subtleties, no confessions or diaries punctuated his life narrative, leaving him to navigate a world where he bore witness to the decline of all he cherished, his brother, his crown, and his cause. In an exhibit of loyalty, he clung to his church, his name, and perhaps an alter ego never unveiled. In his twilight years, Henry's existence dwindled into quiet obscurity and financial hardship. Stripped of means by Napoleon but curiously awarded a pension from the British government, he passed away in 1807, the last legitimate male Stuart, interred in St. Peter's Basilica, beneath a tomb marked by royal titles unacknowledged by England. What stands out most about Henry Benedict Stuart, however, is the intentionality behind his invisibility, a life sketched to evade scrutiny, preserving untold secrets. Yet, the next prince's struggle was rooted in sheer accident. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and heir apparent, found himself ensnared in scandalous whispers of his time but chose silence as defense, confident that history would sweep his narrative into oblivion. or so they believed. In the grand, echoing halls of Victorian royalty, Prince Albert Victor, affectionately dubbed Eddie by his family and the gossiping elite, glided through the mahogany corridors, cloaked in regal blue attire. As the firstborn of Edward III and Queen Victoria's grandson, his path was charted by the weight of expectation, a destined king meant to embody the stability of an extensive empire. However, what the populace desired was a prince brimming with charisma, yet what they encountered was an enigma. Even during his life, Albert Victor remained a riddle shrouded in decorum and tinged with unease. Striking in appearance, tall, fair-haired, and the epitome of noble lineage, he possessed a disconnection that friends often remarked upon. Distant and dreamy, he seemed to drift during conversations. Queen Victoria harbored worries about his intellect, while his tutors questioned his understanding of lessons. Biographers, in their attempts to be kind, classified him as sensitive and innocent, while his uncle Leopold deemed him fragile. As for his education, it became a futile endeavour. He passed through Cambridge, joined the Royal Navy, and eventually found himself in a ceremonial military role, none of which suited him particularly well. While none of this portrayed him as a threat, it also painted him as a disappointment. Things changed dramatically in 1889 when his name became entangled in the notorious Cleveland Street scandal, thrusting the quiet prince into a sensational spotlight. This scandal unveiled a male brothel in London, woven through with the stories of the telegraph boys involved. It began with the arrest of a postal worker and escalated to touch high-ranking individuals, some of whom fled abroad to escape the fallout. Amidst this chaotic revelation, Albert Victor's name surfaced. Initially a whisper, it grew in frequency, leaving an indelible mark on his reputation. Despite the absence of solid proof linking him to the brothel, his name absent from ledger books and no one explicitly accusing him, rumours spread rapidly. Whispers hinted at his frequent visits, speculated that government protection was at play, or even claimed a conspiracy intended to disrupt his place in the throne's line of succession. In response, the palace was silent. No public denials, lawsuits, nor attempts to mitigate the situation were made. Only a deafening quiet followed. Eddie was hastily dispatched abroad. Though the scandal ended up fading from immediate view, its shadow lingered. Later, he was engaged to Princess Mary of Teck, a union more about appearances than genuine affection, and eventually, they never married. Eddie's life came to an abrupt close at just 28, succumbing to influenza and pneumonia during an epidemic. The news of his demise struck like a thunderstorm, leaving Queen Victoria in deep mourning and the nation reeling for its lost prince, dramatically altering the course of the monarchy as it passed to his younger brother, George V. While still intricate, this new lineage faced fewer murmurings. The essence of Albert Victor, however, did not fade. In later years, he became erroneously associated with the infamous Jack the Ripper killings in a story now discredited. His meticulously crafted public persona transformed into a reflection of society's fears after death, portrayed as the forgotten heir, possibly queer, a scandal that lingered just beneath the surface yet never fully materialized. Was Albert Victor a homosexual, bisexual, innocent victim, or someone coddled by privilege? The truth eludes us. However, what stands out is how his life and the intricate web of rumors encapsulate broader themes of silence and societal expectations. He was a man groomed to inherit an empire, taught to smile and follow orders, ultimately remembered more for the shadows of possibility than for his true self. And then enters Charles I, a monarch who seemed more assured in his reign, yet equally mysterious in his affections. While history often focuses on his marriage, trial, and execution, it largely overlooks the depth of his earliest and most contentious love, a friendship that began under paternal scrutiny and never fully released its grip. In the annals of history, Charles Forbin, often overshadowed, is remembered as the monarch who, through his own misjudgment, met his end by beheading. Some see him as a martyr, others as a tyrant, yet many simply view him as a ruler who failed to grasp the gravity of his surroundings. However, before the infamous trial and the fateful drop of the axe, there existed another Charles, a timid, unassuming prince, the second son destined to remain unadorned by a crown. Much like countless royal siblings in his position, he sought the fleeting approval of a father captivated by another. That favoured individual was George VI, Duke of Buckingham, a man whose sway over Charles's father, James VI, was interwoven with both personal charm and political clout. Buckingham was magnetic, flaunting charisma and the looks that set him apart in a court filled with intrigue. He held the place of James's favourite and confidant, with whispers of a deeper bond, possibly of a romantic nature, lingering in the air. Yet, when James left the realm in 1625, George's influence did not vanish. Instead, it unnaturally transferred to his son, Charles. The dynamics between Charles and Buckingham have baffled historians for ages. An affectionate, almost immediate connection reflected in their quick camaraderie. Contrary to expectations for the serious and traditional Charles, Buckingham surged back into prominence as his most trusted advisor, prompting murmurs in the court. For Charles, Buckingham was not merely an ally. He represented allegiance, elegance, and stability. Together they travelled, shared power, and even bickered like an old married couple. With unwavering loyalty, Charles embraced George's family, defended him vehemently in Parliament, and stood by him during public debacles, where they faced accusations of manipulation together. The nature of their closeness, whether tinged with romance, lingers ambiguously, while Charles's letters, though not as openly affectionate as his father's, conveyed an undeniable emotional connection. Known for his reserved disposition, Charles exhibited an unexpected ease around George, hinting at a deeper emotional reliance. The year 1628 would mark a turning point. Buckingham fell victim to an assassin's blade amid preparations for yet another ill-fated venture. The tragedy devastated Charles. Accounts tell of him isolating himself, unable to eat, mourning not just a friend but the loss of his closest confidant. For one who rarely showcased vulnerability, his grief was monumental. After this event, Charles transformed. He became isolated, paranoid, and unwavering in his belief of a divine right to rule unchallenged. He disbanded Parliament, governing solo with decisions that bewildered observers, evidently the choices of a man shattered by losing his one true ally. Ultimately, these unwise choices led to his downfall. In 1649, he became the first English monarch tried and executed by his own subjects. His final words, centered on God, overlooked the profound bond with Buckingham. Over time, his legacy became a battleground for competing ideologies, fading into the shadows as a mere schemer or scapegoat. Yet, the profound connection between Charles and Buckingham stands out, an emotionally vivid partnership in royal history, whose resonance outlived a dynasty, if not an entire kingdom. As the next century unfolded, another monarch would emerge, navigating the tempest of status and allure, a king whose extravagant style and illustrious companion, Beau Brummel, perhaps understood better than anyone the craft of royal performance. In the grand theatre of monarchy, George IV emerged as its most dedicated actor, fully immersed in a role crafted for the ages. His tall wigs and fitted waistcoats mirrored a life styled for constant admiration. For much of his existence, he thrived on being in the public eye. Yet, beneath the surface of Regency glamour lay a man wrestling with his given role, often concealing an identity that could shift the audience's adoration into scrutiny. Starting his public life as the Prince of Wales, George had already become a caricature in his time, deemed frivolous by the very parents who were supposed to understand him. His father, George III, viewed him as indulgent and untrustworthy, yet the public was enamored. Excessive drinking, extravagant spending, and ostentatious architecture marked his reign. He became infatuated with fashion, opera, and a carefully selected circle of friends. Notably, he was linked to Beau Brummel, the dandy who revolutionized male style, a man said to share an intimate connection with the prince. Their friendship blossomed through clever banter, intimate meals, and fashion collaborations that felt like theatrical performances. They were inseparable, with Brummel often referred to as the prince's shadow. Amidst a society that gauged masculinity through dueling and displays of strength, their bond transcended expectation and convention. However, the connection was as fleeting as it was vibrant. As George's debts multiplied and Brummel's boldness escalated, their friendship began to crack. An unforgettable night sealed their fate when Brummel brazenly called George fat at a gathering, leading to a swift fall from royal favor. Brummel fled to France, and George, left to navigate a world of mistresses and political intrigues, felt a lingering echo of their camaraderie. What made their relationship a source of intrigue was more than just its closeness. It challenged societal norms, as George, who was supposed to epitomize royal decorum, surrounded himself with artists and individuals who playfully skirted traditional gender roles. He defied the rigid masculinity expected of him, embracing a softer, more expressive persona. His court morphed into a refuge for the unconventional, where appearance was not merely important, it was revered. Yet, behind closed doors, George faced solitude. His health deteriorated, and debts loomed larger. The charm faded. When he finally ascended to the throne in 1820, he was a mere shadow of his former self, an exaggerated figure burdened by a life of facades. The man who once glided through life accompanied by Brummel's laughter ultimately chose beauty over substance, superficiality over sincerity. Was he hiding behind a mask? Was he performing a role? The reality remains cloaked in the failsafe of scandal and satire. Yet, his narrative reflects a profound truth. Identities often thrive in the shadows, particularly when the crown imposes a facade. Speaking of shadows, we now turn our gaze to another intriguing tale, that of David II, King of Scotland, whose life is entwined with two silent marriages and a court unable to define him. His legacy is marked not by triumphs but by the absence of what he left behind, producing a history rich with silence and speculation. In the annals of Scottish history, David II emerges as a figure shrouded in quiet intrigue. As the lone son of the legendary Robert the Bruce, David inherited not just a kingdom but the weight of a potent myth. His father was hailed as the liberator and warrior king, while David's reign, spanning from 1329 to 1371, was marked by an unsettling absence. Ascending to the throne at the tender age of 5, the very ground beneath him trembled as the English sought to exploit his youth. With their ire still boiling from the Scottish quest for independence, Edward Bale, buoyed by English support, sought to claim the Scottish crown, forcing David and his young wife, Joan of the Tower, into exile in France under the protection of Philip V. David returned to Scotland at 17, only to find a nation that had surged forward in his absence, burdened by fractures and skepticism. Although he fought valiantly, David's tenure was marred by his capture at Neville's Cross at the age of 24, leading to 11 years of captivity where he was sidelined, even as royal expectations pressed upon him. The historical fog surrounding these years thickens as David struggled with the demands of upheld royal decorum, particularly regarding personal conduct. Released in 1357, he discovered that both his marriage and his court were in disarray, with no heirs, no scandal, and no noteworthy events to mark his reign's grandeur. Once liberated, David remarried Margaret Drummond, but once again, The union bore no children and lasted just 5 years before annulment. The murmurs from his contemporaries began to echo an unsettling narrative questioning his masculinity, not through pointed words, but through subtle insinuations of weakness and emotional distance. Medieval historians, while hesitant, crafted a language for kings who left no legacy. Modern interpretations of David II remain polarized. Some view him as a passive victim who never found his footing amidst tumult, while others speculate that he harbored a deeper personal truth, perhaps veiled in asexuality or trauma. Thus, David II departed the throne devoid of an heir and without fervent remembrance, his passing in 1371 barely acknowledged beyond the sombre act of burial. His nephew, Robert II, ascended next, invoking a new legacy. Yet, David's reign, a king devoid of scandal, yet rife with speculation, still presents as a striking anomaly, a ruler living in the shadows of expectations rather than in their light. And centuries later, another royal figure would emerge similarly bound by silence. Edward the Confessor, rumoured to embody saintliness yet whispered about for his lack of marital engagement, stood as a curious parallel in British royal lineage, another reigning figure, defined more by absence than by action. In the chronicle of English history, one figure stands apart from the warriors and conquerors, Edward the Confessor. He was not defined by militaristic triumphs, nor did he father future kings. Rather, his reign, which began in 1042 and ended in 1066, was characterized by an unusual quietness, a preference for prayer over the machinations of power. Edward seemed almost hesitant in his role, presiding over a kingdom with a sombre reluctance. His legacy is shaped not by his victories, but by his choices of abstention, most notably within the confines of his marriage. Bound to Edith of Wessex, the daughter of the influential Earl Godwin, their union was politically motivated rather than a celebration of love. Edith herself was an educated and savvy figure, yet their bond appeared distinctly ceremonial, devoid of children, passion, or even scandal, only silence. From this silence blossomed a narrative that monks and clerics keen to elevate Edward's image crafted a tale of a consummated yet unconsummated marriage. They portrayed him as a figure of chastity, more monk than monarch. Ultimately, the Church canonized him, viewing his lack of heirs as an emblem of divine virtue, a mark of holy kingship. But such notions present a conundrum for today's historians. Celibacy in a royal context wasn't merely rare, it was a source of instability. Kings were meant to ensure succession, to assert masculinity through progeny, yet Edward failed to deliver any heirs during his 2 decades of rule. And this absence of lineage opened the door to a tumultuous power struggle, with figures like Harold Godwinson and William of Normandy seizing the moment. Why was Edward childless? Speculation abounds. Some posit he took a vow of celibacy as a form of gratitude for reclaiming the throne, while others suspect the Church may have spun his story post-mortem as a promotional tool for his sanctity. After all, a king resisting earthly temptations certainly appeared holier. There's another intriguing angle, however, often left unspoken. Edward perhaps had no inclination toward women, or the marital expectations that typically accompanied kingship. His closest relationships were with men, his emotional ties seemingly directed toward his faith, his male household, and his chaplain. While concrete evidence of romantic involvement is scant, his complete lack of marital conduct is striking. In an era where kings' affairs were often well documented, Edward remained conspicuously silent. Could he have been asexual, or perhaps queer? Or was he simply more attuned to the solitude offered by faith than to the demands of an heir? Edward the Confessor remains an enigmatic figure, revered by some yet misunderstood by others, a testament to how royal narratives can just as easily echo absence as they can celebrate deeds. Yet even his poised presence could not shield him from the rumors lurking in the shadows of history. Just a short while afterward, the mere hint of softness or gentleness could be weaponized against a prince, branding him dangerous. This brings us to our next figure, who stands not as a king but as an archetype, embodying the medieval anxieties surrounding power, masculinity, and the peril that arises when rulers seem too tender. Richard, the son of the third Duke of York, embodies a curious phenomenon of the medieval era, the smear campaign. In a time long before the sensationalism of modern tabloids, royal images were tarnished not through cold, hard facts, but through calculated insinuations. The most damaging allegation a prince could face often centered around his masculinity. He is soft, overly fond of his male companions, preferring their company over that of women. Such accusations suggested he lacked the strength to rule effectively. This pattern was universal, casting shadows over kings, dukes, and would-be heirs alike, a poison pen letter that was vague enough to evade rebuttal yet sharp enough to inflict lasting harm. Take, for example, the enigmatic son of Richard. It could have been any of his heirs, Edward IV, Edmund, or most notably, Richard III. Here, we find not a quest for a singular identity but rather a study of a recurring theme, the shaming playbook used against royal figures who deviated from the era's harsh standards of manhood. The application of slander was depressingly straightforward. Dissonance in behavior led to whispers and allegations of unmanly interests, excessive affections for male favorites, and overly extravagant attire. Truth became irrelevant. The smear found its strength in its propagation. This strategy thrived on anonymity, most dramatically seen in the fates of Edward II and Richard II, whose names unfairly became synonymous with insinuation and gender-based scorn. Any royal man who strayed from the archetype of a military hero was framed as suspicious. Intriguingly, these attacks seldom relied on evidence. The mere accusations served as the proof. Consider Richard III, whose remains were unearthed from an unassuming parking lot centuries later, all while his legacy was overshadowed by a torrent of derogatory narratives that painted him as cruel and twisted. Although he may not be the central figure in our discourse, his portrayal demonstrates how easily gendered slurs infiltrated and politicized history. Voiced in hushed tones, the terms used kept the implication of his alleged deviance alive without needing direct accusations. The implications were there, lingering like smoke without needing a flame. These smear narratives found their way into covert pamphlets and plays. A consistent theme depicted the unfitting prince as someone more preoccupied with fashion than governance. His court was said to be filled with male favorites, while dark whispers filled the night. The portrayal hinted that his very essence rendered him unworthy of ruling. Ironically, some of Britain's most effective sovereigns faced such scorn, while their more physically aggressive counterparts sowed chaos and bloodshed. This ongoing discourse illustrates a systemic nature of queer-coded slander, so prevalent it felt like a part of royal policy. The mechanisms were in place, yielding effective results. Yet, what occurs when a monarch does not just fit but far exceeds expectations, boldly heterosexual albeit still subjected to rumour? Enter James IV of Scotland, whose legendary romantic exploits somehow did little to silence emerging doubts about his character. A figure of undeniable charisma and charm, James IV of Scotland cut an imposing silhouette amidst the storied past of his realm. A monarch renowned for his valour and an expansive list of romantic conquests among Scotland's noble women, one might not imagine him within the complex tapestry of gender ambiguity. Historically, he is celebrated as stanchly heterosexual, his passionate affairs and acknowledged illegitimate progeny reinforcing this image. Fluent in multiple languages and captivated by chivalry, he found joy in tournaments and carried the historical weight of being the last Scottish king to inspire genuine national affection before the Scottish crown fell to England. Yet, A persistent murmur lingers around James IV's legacy, whispers of favoured companions and deep male friendships that weave a thread of complexity into his robust image. While the predominant historical narrative lacks concrete evidence of any same-sex relationships, no scandalous letters or outcry from the Church, which would certainly have condemned such matters, James IV stood in stark contrast to his more celibate successor, James V, whose own letters to male favourites raised eyebrows. James IV possessed an abundance of confidence, moving through his world as if nothing were concealed. However, beneath the surface of his many love affairs, there sits an intriguing dynamic. His court was a vibrant tapestry of scholars, alchemists, and astrologers, revealing the monarch's eclectic interests. His flamboyant attire, adorned in rich silks and gold threads, drew scrutiny from English observers who deemed him a tad too sophisticated, a hint of the elegance the English considered excessive. An ardent supporter of artists and musicians, James infused his reign with theatricality, embodying an archetype of Renaissance masculinity. While not necessarily feminine, his rule became a performative spectacle, inviting a space of nuanced interpretations of masculinity. Indeed, his interactions with male courtiers were outwardly proper, yet several chroniclers noted his emotional expressiveness in private, relying on trusted advisors like William Elphinstone and David Lindsay for counsel. Though no scandalous evidence exists, such profound emotional connections between men, infused with favoritism, were often viewed with suspicion, challenging the tidy image of virile kingship. The conjectures surrounding James IV might not be entirely about his identity, but rather about the societal needs to define him. Residing at a cultural juncture where medieval traditions intertwined with Renaissance ideals, he embodied the duality of a warrior artist, an unabashed womanizer, and a reflective ruler who, while owning his flaws, sought to manage his public persona vigorously. Within this intersection of truth and artifice resides the tantalizing possibility of a deeper narrative. Concluding his life on the battlefield at Flodden in 1513, James IV remains a historical enigma, with his body never conclusively uncovered. His demise, shrouded in myth, left a legacy of poetry, offspring, and a realm soon to be consumed by the aspirations of Henry VIII. But history has a curious tendency to intertwine narratives. If James IV's life hints at the edges of ambiguity, the next character erupts boldly from the shadows. John, the king's younger brother, a controversial figure overshadowed by the infamous reversal of the Magna Carta. His reign invited scorn, with detractors labeling him a tyrant and an unnatural force, spinning tales and rumors that painted a vivid, if unflattering, picture of his legacy. John, King of England. While some kings leave behind great works, King John is remembered for the numerous failures that transpired during his reign. He is depicted as the antagonist in the tales of Robin Hood, the sibling who fell short of living up to the gallant legacy of Richard the Lionheart. He's the monarch who signed the Magna Carta only to lament the decision almost immediately. Within the annals of English history, John is often ranked among the least esteemed rulers, petty, paranoid, and perpetually unpopular. Intriguingly, the smear campaigns against him tend to illuminate the intricacies of medieval politics rather than accurately reflect his true character. Born in 1166 as the youngest son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, John was never destined for the throne. His elder brothers, Henry the Young King, Richard the Lionheart, and Geoffrey of Brittany, were larger-than-life figures, while he was simply an afterthought, dubbed Lackland for his lack of substantial inheritance. Yet, fate has a peculiar way of favouring some. One by one, his brothers met their untimely ends, and by 1199, John ascended to the throne. From that moment on, it seemed as if a concerted effort was underway to strip him of his crown. He didn't improve his own standing. His rule was riddled with military failures, political missteps, and personal strife. He lost Normandy to the French, instituted unpopular taxes, and ignited rebellions through his volatile governance. Amidst these overt failures, a more insidious narrative of character assassination began to evolve. John wasn't merely an ineffective king. He was portrayed as something more sinister, even unnatural. Here lies the murkiness. Chronicles from the era contain accusations of sodomy, always framed as slurs rather than substantiated claims. In the fluid lexicon of medieval Europe, such terms encompassed a spectrum of meanings, often relating to moral decay or non-procreative sexual acts. In John's case, these insinuations likely served as shorthand for judging his inadequacies as a ruler. Monks, barons, and his foes sought to rationalize his shortcomings, resorting to standard jibes. He was greedy, cruel, and perverse. Chroniclers like Matthew Paris and Ralph of Coggeshall reveled in tarnishing John's reputation, accusing him of heresy and consorting with Jews and Muslims, all while accusing him of slighting the Church's honor. Within this maelstrom of allegations, distortions about his sexuality took root, not due to substantiation, but as a means to fully undermine his legitimacy. A monarch who falters in battle can still evoke fear, but one labeled as sexually deviant could be easily cast aside. This aspect of John's story is especially revealing. His marital record, featuring 2 wives, multiple children, and numerous affairs, renders the claims of queerness implausible at face value. However, the tenacity of the slander underscores how gender and sexuality became weapons of political warfare. In the 13th century, branding a king as lacking masculinity meant condemning his capability to rule. It suggested a realm turned upside down, which, in John's case, wasn't entirely unfounded. By 1215, facing dissent from the barons, John was compelled to sign the Magna Carta, a document now revered as a cornerstone of modern constitutional law. Yet, during his era, it resembled more of a royal restraint, an array of humiliating concessions from a monarch whose trust had eroded. He passed away the following year, reportedly due to dysentery, but chroniclers turned his demise into a narrative of divine retribution. There were no noble tributes, no grand heroic tales, just a gradual descent into the annals of historical villainy. Yet John's legacy serves as a poignant reminder that reputations are often shaped by such accusations. When kings faltered, their adversaries distorted their personas, painting them not just as ineffective but as fundamentally flawed. The truth mattered little. What stuck was the stain, a mark that could afflict the next generation. For John's descendant, Henry VI, would inherit more than a crown. He would also bear the weight of similar denigrating labels, quiet and unmanly, branded in the eyes of many as entirely unfit for the brutal demands of kingship. In the annals of English history, Henry VI stands as an anomaly amid a lineage of schemers, warriors, and tyrants. A king whose reign was marked not by conquest or political maneuvering, but by a profound sense of spirituality. Unlike the fierce warriors of his time, Henry favored prayer over power, opting for solitude instead of statecraft. This gentle demeanor was especially shocking in 15th century England, a nation spiraling towards civil war. Crowned as a mere infant following his father, Henry V, demise, Henry VI was thrust into a turbulent realm. He inherited a war-weary kingdom at just 9 months old, burdened by the legacy of masculine valor and military triumph. However, he could not conform. Henry was mild-mannered, soft-spoken, and devout, showing little interest in the glory of his father's conquests. Sadly, it seems that he grappled with profound health issues, displaying troubling mental episodes that left him detached from reality. In 1453, he lapsed into a stupor that rendered him unable to recognize his own son, a stark departure from the expectations of kingship. In the eyes of contemporary nobles, Henry's gentle nature signaled weakness. He didn't lead his armies into battle, nor did he seize control of Parliament or even engage robustly in courtly affairs. Rather, he dedicated his efforts to founding educational institutions and supporting religious communities, spending hours in private prayer. This was perplexing to the chroniclers of his time, who began to spread insidious rumors. They whispered that Henry was simply too pious, too subdued, too contemplative to be a proper king. His marriage to Margaret of Anjou was fraught with speculation. They bore only one child, Edward of Westminster, and in a court obsessed with virility, Henry's lack of interest in carnal pursuits became a cause for scorn. In a realm where dominance and aggression defined masculinity, his disinterest felt provocative. The nobles questioned his fitness for rule. If he shunned leadership, who then commanded the throne? They insinuated not only impotence in terms of power, but hinted at something more radical about his character nature. When the Wars of the Roses ignited, Henry's reputation was already in tatters. His wife assumed the reins of power as critics painted him as weak and ineffective. He briefly lost the crown only to reclaim it, before ultimately succumbing to permanent loss. His life ended in 1471 under the shadow of the Tower of London. Sources remain vague regarding the nature of his death. Interestingly, in the decades to come, popular tradition would canonize him as a saint, a title not granted by Rome, but by the folk who admired his quiet struggle. This unrecognized sainthood, however, forms a curious legacy for a monarch. Henry VI's narrative serves as a poignant reminder that historical queerness often extends beyond romance and desire. It encapsulates the failure to fulfill societal expectations. The doubts surrounding Henry didn't cease with him. Instead, they would trail into the life of Richard III. Buckling beneath scoliosis, Richard's own legend grew under the weight of whispers that pursued him relentlessly. Though he met his end in battle, the rumors surrounding his existence persisted long after, unveiling the complex tapestry of what it meant to be a ruler in a world consumed by Byzantine politics and perceptions of identity. In the annals of history, few figures are as enveloped in intrigue as Richard III. He is often remembered by the curve of his spine and the fleeting shadow cast by a crown he held for a mere 2 years. Shakespeare painted him a hunchbacked villain, a tyrant, the usurper responsible for the tragic fate of young princes, as dictated by the histories penned by his adversaries. Yet, if we peel back the layers of propaganda, art, and dramatic interpretation, we uncover a man shrouded in complexity, whose reality diverged sharply from the caricature formed by history. Richard was born in 1452, the 11th of 12 children of Richard, Duke of York, and Cecil Neville. He, like many of his siblings, grew up amidst the din of the Wars of the Roses, a conflict that tore at the very fabric of England. By the time Richard reached adolescence, he was steeped in the intrigue of royal court life. Betrayals and shifting alliances were the lessons of his youth. Yet he emerged as a faithful commander under his brother, Edward IV, and a trustworthy administrator in the north, eventually ascending to the throne himself. However, the road to kingship was fraught with controversy. Following Edward IV's passing, Richard became Lord Protector for his nephew, Edward V. But just weeks later, he claimed the crown, leading to the mysterious disappearance of the young princes in the Tower of London, a haunting enigma that has clouded his legacy ever since. The question of his guilt remains a subject of fervent debate, overshadowed by an immediate and destructive smear campaign designed to dismantle his reputation. The Tudor regime, eager to consolidate its power, employed historians, artists, and playwrights to tarnish Richard's legacy. They depicted him as physically grotesque, morally depraved, and psychologically unbalanced. Thomas More, writing during the reign of Henry VIII, described him as spiteful, envious, with a crooked back and sinister demeanor. Shakespeare took these ideas, crafting a character whose physical deformities were thought to reflect his malevolence, a depiction that would resonate throughout the centuries. Yet, alongside these disparaging portrayals, a more nuanced suggestion began to surface. Richard was not merely evil, he was different. Asexual and seemingly uninterested in women, Richard's marriage to Anne Neville often appeared more political than romantic. Their single child, who died young, was emblematic of a uniquely private existence. Amidst the fervent courtly gossip that characterized medieval nobility, Richard exhibited a rare detachment, sparking insinuations of deeper, unmanly perversions. Scholars now ponder whether these discomforts stemmed from his emotional distance and preference for male companionship over the traditional trappings of kingship. As a ruler, Richard maintained a small, tightly knit court, eschewing the traditional pomp and pageantry associated with monarchy. His reign was characterized by intensity and isolation, with loyal advisors drawn from the north rather than the elite class of the moment. While none of this might have been scandalous, it contributed to a perception of Richard as an outsider. His death at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 marked the end of the Plantagenet dynasty. His body, unceremoniously discarded in a shallow grave, became a footnote to a broader narrative of triumph for his enemies. Yet, centuries later, Richard's remains were unearthed beneath a Leicester parking lot in 2012, revealing a skeleton that bore signs of scoliosis but defied the image of monstrosity. The truth that emerged depicted a man human, not villain or saint, but a figure of genuine complexity. The whispers that shadowed his life regarding his physicality, his marriage, and his inner world echoed a common theme. Those who disrupt norms invite scrutiny. As we turn the page to the next chapter of our tale, we see another king, James II, who existed at the intersection of faith and identity. A Catholic ruler in a time dominated by Protestantism, he faced relentless scrutiny that transcended mere religious differences, as he contended with the perilous landscape of political and personal identity in a turbulent age. In the chronicles of British royalty, James II of England and VII of Scotland often finds himself encapsulated by a singular event, the Glorious Revolution. This parliamentary coup, more peaceful than one might expect, ousted him from power, marking the end of the last Catholic monarch's reign and ushering in a Protestant successor. But the narrative of James II stretches far beyond this moment of dispossession, unveiling a tapestry woven with personal and political strife. To his adversaries, labeling him a poor king was insufficient. They aimed for something deeper, painting him as an unnatural ruler. Born amidst the turmoil of the English Civil War in 1633, James's upbringing was fraught with ideological conflict. Witnessing his father, Charles I, meet his end and his brother, Charles II, languish in exile, James's formative years were spent navigating the treacherous waters of royal expectations, grappling with issues of identity and allegiance in a fractious world. As the monarchy was restored in 1660, James returned, a man shaped by hardship and tempered with a severe moral compass, characteristics that would ultimately lead to his downfall. In the public sphere, James's life appeared meticulously heterosexual. He wed twice, fathered numerous children, and was linked with notable mistresses. His reputation oscillated between indulgence and respectability among his peers. Yet, as the tides of his reign began to turn, whispers morphed into a sinister campaign of slander. Allegations began to insinuate he was sodomitical, effeminate, and unworthy of rule, employing a time-worn tactic of undermining a king through sexual accusations, regardless of their foundation in truth. This pattern was not novel. It echoed the same disparagements directed at his father and grandfather. Charles I perceived weakness, and James I's emotional attachments to young men were previously exploited in their respective downfalls. The cultural consciousness of post-Reformation England often linked Catholicism with secrecy and moral decay, setting the stage for the treatment James II would later endure. Upon ascending the throne in 1685, the whispers only grew bolder as James appointed Catholics to significant positions, omitting parliamentary oversight, and sought to revoke anti-Catholic laws. The birth of his Catholic son in 1688, supplanting the Protestant line of succession, ignited the already tense discourse. Political pamphlets did more than attack his policies. They struck at his essence, branding him as overly reliant on his Jesuit advisors, too intimate with foreign influences, and accused him of harboring pervasive vices at court. While rare was anyone daring enough to directly label James as queer, the veiled implications permeated the public narrative. Despite the absence of credible evidence to support such claims, with no historical documentation linking him to same-sex relationships, the perfidious slander that blossomed around him showcased how deeply ingrained such tropes were in royal commentary. Ultimately, James II's expulsion stemmed not from his private life, but from a public persona at odds with a Protestant nation resistant to a Catholic legacy. Even in his exile in France, beneath Louis XIV's protection, the taunting rumors persisted, rebranding his queerness not as an integral part of his being, but a symbol of his kingly failure. James II stands as a stark reminder of how swiftly accusations of deviance could besiege even the most seemingly stalwart kings when their power waned. This tale of royal discontent leads us to recall another lesser-known figure, Frederick, the Prince of Wales, never to wear a crown, yet a source of mockery within the aristocracy. His demeanor, alliances, and affected charm rendered him an enigma, standing apart in the court's shadowed corridors, a punchline in a narrative where conformity seemed to hold sway. Frederick, Prince of Wales, a name often obscured by time, yet his life stands as a poignant reminder of the shadows lurking beneath royal grandeur. Living as the heir apparent, Frederick never ascended to the throne, passing before he could make his mark. His existence unfolded not amidst great wars or revolutions, but in the quiet turbulence of familial relationships, caught in the impending tides of history that would wash over his son, George III. Frederick's story, lacking traditional drama, possesses an aura of complexity. His politics irritated the establishment, while his unconventional lifestyle perplexed those around him, creating an enigmatic figure wrapped in veiled insinuations. Born in Hanover in 1707, he spent the first 2 decades of his life distanced from England, creating a formidable gap not only in geography but in the paternal bond with George II, his father, who scarcely tolerated him, and with whom a famously acrimonious relationship flourished. Queen Caroline, Frederick's mother, reportedly wished ill on her son, crafting a rather peculiar family portrait. Yet, Frederick was a man of flair. He emerged as a patron of the arts and a self-proclaimed intellectual, poised against the backdrop of a stagnant court. His aesthetic choices, flamboyant attire and impeccably styled hair, contrasted sharply with the rigidity of royal life. Establishing a court that defied the conventions of his fathers, he surrounded himself with a motley crew of poets and musicians. Public perception painted him as a fashionable irritant, while the whispers of speculation regarding his personal life simmered beneath the surface, fueled by the machinations of societal norms. In 1736, Frederick married Princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha, fathering 9 children. Yet, the reality of their union, a house divided by emotional distance and his proclivity for male companions, spurred incessant gossip that belied the appearances of propriety. The political press relished in insinuations, cloaking their criticisms in ambiguity, leaving behind an echo of suspicion that permeated the air. A generational clash shaped the dynamic between Frederick and his father. George II embodied strict Hanoverian decorum, while Frederick's essence overflowed with emotion and Enlightenment ideals, enkindling his advocacy for liberty and opposition to conflict. His aesthetic, adorned in pastel waistcoats and powdered wigs, fueled the discourse of ideological fragility in an age that revered a muscular monarchy. This delicate association often unearthed latent suspicions regarding his sexual identity. Tragically, Frederick met his end in 1751, likely falling victim to a pulmonary embolism, his death poetically described as a heart bursting before he could seize the crown. His son, George III, poised to inherit a legacy of turmoil. What Frederick left behind is neither a grand monument nor a scandal, but merely the lingering essence of a man whose presence resonates through generations. This aura of complexity resonates once more in the tale of another royal, one who, in his ostentatious display of masculinity and carefully constructed facade, inspired curiosity and speculation. His name was Prince William Frederick, Duke of Gloucester in Edinburgh. An evocative figure of the Regency era, he might just be the most intriguing individual you've never encountered. In the unfolding saga of the British royal narrative, a lesser-seen figure emerges from the shadows, Prince William Frederick, the Duke of Gloucester and Edinburgh. Draped in elegance and poised under the soft glow of candlelight, he played his part just out of the spotlight, a cousin to kings yet curiously sidelined. His presence emanated an aura of quiet charm, not through the clamour of politics or the clangor of warfare, but through an unrelenting dedication to presentation. Born in 1776 to Prince William Henry, the Duke of Gloucester and sibling to King George III, he was born into privilege but was spared the heavy crown's expectations. His royal birth allowed him to witness critical royal occasions without the burden of sovereignty. This unique position offered him the platform to explore the art of spectacle, a canvas on which he painted his life through vibrant angles. Seizing the subtleties of fashion, the Duke became a standout figure in a society fueled by the extravagant aesthetics of the late Georgian and Regency era, a time woven with powdered wigs, poetic expressions, and veiled critiques. His wardrobe spoke volumes, adorned with embroidered waistcoats, glimmering buttons, and the soft embrace of velvet jackets, epitomizing a language of sartorial excellence. Though contemporaries labelled him a dandy, this designation carried an undertone of disdain, suggesting an obsession with beauty that veered away from the stoic masculinity expected of royal lineage. His lifelong bachelorhood and unabashed love for the arts heightened the scrutiny, but he embraced his identity amidst swirling rumours. In the salons and drawing rooms of society's elite, he mingled with fellow bachelors and artists, fostering a life abundant in cultural patronage. Unlike other royals immersed in activities of combat or governance, Gloucester curated an existence steeped in personal performance, one that deflected attention from his inner life toward the allure of his outwardly polished image. The pièce de résistance of his life came unexpectedly. At the age of 40, he married his cousin Princess Mary, the progeny of King George III. Their union, a calculated move masked as familial duty, yielded no heirs and generated little public fervour, merely intensifying the conjecture surrounding his life choices. In whispers, the tale echoed of a man who eluded marriage until compelled, surrounded by stylish companions and through whom a coded quina surfaced. Historians have debated his legacy. Some emphasize his dedication to his royal duties and supportive role within the monarchy, while others uncover the nuanced portrait of a softly defiant figure navigating the limits of expression through fashion rather than words. Ultimately, William Frederick's legacy was shaped not by power but by his meticulously crafted identity, his story enveloped in rich aesthetics. Upon his passing in 1834, his life had become a quiet footnote, his funeral a mere whisper in history, yet within the recesses of Regency remembrance, his figure persists, ambiguous, elegant, and impeccably fashioned. A final revelation waits just beyond the horizon, a figure enshrouded in mystery yet marked by distinction. Lord Louis Mountbatten, a war hero, viceroy, and great-uncle to a future king, housed a truth obscured by decorum and expectation. Beneath the accolades and titles loomed a profound question left unasked, perhaps even unacknowledged. Who, indeed, was Lord Louis Mountbatten? Louis Mountbatten, the first Earl Mountbatten of Burma, stands as the quintessential figure of the imperial gentleman in Britain's grand narrative. A soldier, sailor, and statesman, he deftly navigated the tumultuous waters of the 20th century, adorned in crisp uniforms and casting steely smiles. He whispered into the ears of royalty and political leaders alike, playing a crucial role as the last viceroy of India and a trusted uncle to Prince Philip. Yet, beneath the polished exterior of Mountbatten's notable achievements, a shroud of whispers enveloped his legacy, hinting at secrets that refused to fade away. Born in 1900 to Prince Louis of Battenberg and Princess Victoria of Hesse, he emerged into a lineage of royal privilege yet carved out his own identity through ambition. Educated at the Royal Naval College, his charisma earned him the affectionate nickname Dickie, albeit he was formerly known as Louis, a name befitting a figure crafted for mythologizing. His marriage to Edwina Ashley, a prominent socialite of wealth and charm, presented a glamorous facade, but their relationship was anything but traditional. With emotional complexities at play and publicly known affairs, including a close bond with Jawaharlal Nehru, their marriage appeared more as a partnership stitched with mutual affection yet separated by personal liberties. Rows of uncertainty shadowed Mountbatten's private life, particularly concerning his sexual orientation, which has been whispered about for decades. Several biographies, notably those by Andrew Loney, pose the possibility of his bisexuality, hinting at encounters that contradicted the straight-laced public image he projected. The whispers were fueled by anonymous reports, redacted MI5 files, and accounts from those close to the royal circle, each thread suggesting a hidden narrative beneath the surface. Documents from the 1940s even suggested he was labeled a homosexual with troubling allegations. Though lacking in verified evidence, they reflect the complex scrutiny he faced and the ambiguous interpretations that colored his life. What stands more clearly, however, is Mountbatten's preference for the camaraderie of younger men, especially in his twilight years. Engaging with aides and protégés, he fostered friendships infused with emotional depth and paternal instincts, notably mentoring Prince Charles, whom he advised on duty and decorum. But the questions about his sexuality remain unanswered, with an archive that reveals more through silence than through clarity. For those shrouded in royal narratives, the unspoken often becomes integral to their legacies. The British establishment had crafted ways to shroud narratives, and Mountbatten, loyal and shrewd, adhered to the silent culture of his time. His life met a tragic turn in 1979 when he was assassinated by the IRA. His boat exploded off Mullimore, killing him and others. Though the act carried political weight, it symbolized a poignant loss, not just of an individual but of an entire era seconds before dusk fell on the empire he once served. His state funeral, immaculate and somber, echoed with a lingering sense of unfamiliarity, a feeling that the man behind the titles and honors remained strangely unknown. In a royal history steeped in ambiguity, scandals danced in the shadow of certainty, where unuttered truths and unexpressed emotions lingered. The enduring mysteries of such lives reflect not just recorded facts, but the profound truths people hesitated to disclose. From the House of Windsor and beyond, the unsaid has echoed far more resonantly than the spoken.